This video will introduce you to the Crosstab query. I'm going to open up the query options so that I can explain this in a little bit more detail. To create a Crosstab query, we head to the Explore ribbon and in the query area choose Crosstab. The Crosstab query has two primary functions. You'll see there is an option through which you can choose what to crosstab your codes against, and you can choose either attributes or cases. If you select attributes, you can cross-tabulate your codes versus file or case classifications and two attributes within these. This is a great way to explore your data in a lot more detail and works particularly well for surveys. If you choose cases, you can export your codes cross-tabulated against cases, and you can export this data as a .sav file for statistical analysis in SPSS, or you can choose to save this as an Excel file for use in an alternative program. The first example I'm going to go for is cross-tabulating against attributes. I start off by bringing in the codes that I want to cross-tabulate against. I'm going to head into the codes area, nodes, and then open up the sense of community down east, and I'm going to highlight the three local connection, local identity, local knowledge codes and drag them into the codes area of the Crosstab query. I'm going to leave the classification at person, but I need to specify the attributes. The first one that I want to go for are generations down east, and second I'm going to choose gender. I'm using this query to test a theory that I have. I'm assuming that the longer or the more generations down east an individual has been, the more they will refer to things to do with local connection, local identity and local knowledge. If I run this query, I'll find out the answer. As this is quite a wide set of results, we can transpose this so I can see all of my results on one screen. Next up, I'm going to use cell shading so that I can interpret my results a little clearer. I'm just going to use the white-green option to highlight which areas have the larger values. Without even reading the numbers, I can already see a pattern. Those who are generation down east 3 or more have far more references to the themes of local connection, local identity and local knowledge than those generation down east none, where there are no references. Before we look at how to interpret this table, it's important to know what the numbers mean. By default, the Crosstab query will show you cases coded and counts. Therefore, if you look at the local knowledge column and read downwards, you can see no females or males were coded to the theme of local knowledge under generations down east none. If we look further down this column, we can see one male for both generations down east 1 and generations down east 2 cross-tabulate with this particular theme. If we look down one step further, we can see 4 under the value for local knowledge and female. This means 4 cases that have the attribute female also have data within them coded to local knowledge. Unlike the default view of the matrix coding query, this is relating to cases coded. Therefore, this means 4 individual female participants with that attribute have had that theme identified within their case. I can of course change these values to coding references, in which case we can see these numbers change. Now it is no longer based on individuals, but it is based on how many references amongst all of the individuals that these themes appear within these attributes of the cases. I am however going to switch this back to cases coded because this actually better reflects what I'm interested in. While it's fairly clear how to read the rows and the columns, you'll notice some additional numbers. If we look where it says generation down east equals none, brackets 19, That number means that in total there are 19 cases that have the attribute generations down east of none. You can see this makes sense if we look at the gender female and gender male. There are 14 males and 5 females, and those two added together equal 19. Therefore, the brackets always are showing us the total number of cases that match that criteria. This is very useful for interpreting our data. For while we see a pattern, we can see there were physically more people who identified as generations down east 3 or more. So while there is a pattern, it could just be because we spoke to more people in that particular categorisation. It's always important to explore this data further to see if you can understand what it means. If I want to do that, all I need to do is double click on any cell, and NVivo will query and give me the results to show the actual text where these two things overlap. This makes it a valuable way for me to explore my data in more detail. Similar to the matrix coding query, I can also view this as a chart. I also have the options to change how this is visualised so that I can explore this data graphically. As with any other query, I can right click to export both the chart and the table for use elsewhere. My first crosstab query used 3 dimensions of data. I was looking at the 3 themes alongside the attribute values for gender and generations down east. I'm now going to make an example that brings in a 4th dimension of data. I'm heading back into the Explore ribbon and opening up the crosstab query. This time for my codes, I'm going to select the 4 themes underneath attitude. So these attitudes indicate the general sentiment expressed, as coded by the researchers. The order of these doesn't necessarily make sense, so I'm going to move mix to fall between negative and positive, and I'm choosing to put neutral at the start. Next up, I'm going to remain using the person classification and choose a couple of attributes underneath it. Once again, I'm going to go for generations down east and also gender. If I ran this query now, it wouldn't be particularly useful. It would just show me all references to neutral, negative, mixed and positive attitudes throughout the entire project. However, using the search in option, I can limit this to refine the search to a particular file or folder or group of files. In this case, I'm going to choose selected items and open up the nodes folder, and from here I'm going to select economy and then OK. What this query will now do is it will demonstrate how many times neutral, negative, mixed or positive attitudes have been coded to participants while they have been also coded to the economy theme. The results for this will be cross-tabulated by both how many generations down east the individuals are and their gender, and running the query will get my results. Just as before, I'm going to transpose these results and use the green-white shading to help me interpret these further. This is a really good example of how I can bring in an additional dimension of data by limiting my searching to include a file or a folder or a group of files. The final example for the crosstab query that I want to go through is based on the use of cross-tabulating versus cases instead of attributes. I open up the crosstab query just as before, but this time I change the value of crosstab code against to cases. Under my codes, I can view my full list of themes and I can choose any that I wish. For this example, I'm going to focus on all of the themes underneath fishing industry decline, and I have ticked all of these and clicked OK. Next, I need to add in the cases that I want to cross-tabulate these themes against. To do this, I click on the plus, and I'm going to tick the box here to bring in all of the cases that are in the person folder. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to run the query. This time you'll see I have a full list of all of the participants and how many coding references they have to each of the themes I have selected. I can use the shading once again to explore how this data is distributed. While this isn't a particularly useful table for a descriptive analysis, I could export these results and choose to export them as an SPSS data file. I would then be able to open this data within SPSS and run a statistical analysis, and it would allow me to see if there is any significance in the differences I'm seeing in the data. Much like any other query in NVivo, you can also use the options to save these results to the project and add the query to the project itself so you can easily rerun it. Now it's time for you to try using the Crosstab query.